Hi, let's take a brief look at cognitivism and the way it interprets the way that people learn. In the 1950s, several psychologists came up with a succinct definition to define learning. It was agreed that learning is a change in behavior, but that definition just does not quite tell enough of the story. So well-known educator Gene Ormerod believes that when defining what learning is, it is important to also address the mental change and its associations as a result of experience. But then when we look at psychologist and educator Nud Illaris, he firmly believes that there are three dimensions in learning: cognition, emotion, and society. So how about us just taking those definitions and use what Merriam's did by combining Ormerod's and Illaris' definitions and come up with that learning is a process that brings together cognitive, emotional, and environmental influences and experiences for acquiring, enhancing, or making changes in one's knowledge, skills, values, and worldviews. Whew, that was a mouthful. Okay, so now that we know what learning is, the big question is, how do we learn? The answer to this question has been pursued for centuries by psychologists, neuroscientists, philosophers, and educators. In fact, it is this pursuit that has brought about what we now call learning theories, which is simply explaining what happens when we learn. We've been focusing on three learning theories: behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism. So what's the difference between them? Behaviorism is teacher-centered and is all about learning and behavior being influenced by external reinforcements from one's environment. Among behaviorism, basic tenets are: when we are born, our minds are blank slates. Behaviors and actions can be observed and measured. Now, constructivism is student-centered. It says that people construct their own understanding and knowledge of the world through experiencing things and reflecting on those experiences. Then we have cognitivism. Now, its focus is on what students know, which becomes a springboard for teachers to piggyback on to further students' knowledge. It's all about students taking what is their working memory and eventually moving it into their long-term memory, where it is organized, stored, and can later be retrieved and transferred into new environments or new settings. This process demonstrates one of the main tenets of cognitivism: transference. Cognitivism is not about rote memorization, but about real-life applications. How can I apply what I've learned in other environments or settings? Another tenet is its focus is on active learning, meaning that learners are active participants throughout the learning process. Research reveals that learning changes the physical structure of the brain, and with it, the functional organization of the brain. I know, that's pretty deep. That's where cognitivism comes in. Memory is a key component in cognitive theory. Now, Ormerod tells us that our working memory, which is what holds what a person is actively thinking, and what I like to call in-the-moment thinking. But this type of memory is limited, and it can only hold a small amount of information. And studies reveal that it lasts only for about 5 to 20 seconds. But we also have long-term memory. And this is where knowledge, memories, and even our skills are stored. This is the memory we draw from and utilize to transfer into different settings. Now, this even includes rote memory. And I know it gets a bad name, but rote memory does have its place in learning. The major issue is that rote memory is stored in our long-term memory without making any sense or connections, so it's not attached to any meaning. Now, this is where John Dewey's research, published back in 1916, comes in. He believed that learning should not be isolated. Instead, he believed that what was learned in school should be connectable in daily life. You see, in cognitive learning, learners are actively engaged in their learning. There are many others who have contributed to the cognitivism learning theory, such as Edward Tolman. Now, he was educated in behaviorism, but he disagreed with its ignoring the importance of the role that introspection had in our learning. His study on how rats are able to create mental maps demonstrated that direct reinforcement is not always a requirement for learning to occur. Then we have Richard Meyer's work on psychology and education. Now, if you've been studying ID for any length of time, you know he has made major contributions, not just to face-to-face class, but one of his great works has been how to enhance online learning. But what Richard Meyer did, he further enhances our understanding on the cognitive processes. And also we have Gene Pages, whose research underscored how individuals construct new knowledge and understanding on what they already know and believe. And then it leads to learning. Now, that's what he believed. He said that once we know something, or once we have been exposed to a particular learning, and we have moved it from our short-term memory into our long-term memory, we're able to connect that learning in new settings. And that is so important. Again, and that's the purpose when we talk about cognitivism. There's also Robert Gagne's work on the process of how the brain works when problem solving. And his frequently used 9 events of instruction, which I personally am a fan of. And it continues to impact course design and instruction today. So exactly how does cognitivism work? When enrolled in paralegal studies, a form of cognitivism was used to help us to know how to better research and connect new legal cases based on the knowledge that we had already accumulated from various judicial rulings in similar cases. So step 1 was we were given cases to research to determine the best way to prosecute or to defend, depending upon what our role was in that particular scenario. Then step 2, we had to rely on existing knowledge. So in order to know how to properly research the case, I first had to tap into information that I'd previously stored in my memories. Now, step 3, I had to connect what was stored and see how it connected to my current setting or my new legal case. Step 4, then I had to transfer that knowledge and use it to create a legal brief based on my knowledge of the law in prior cases. Now, the more depth that I had in case rulings, now not just wrote memories of cases, but understanding the whys and the hows, the better researcher I became because I was able to see dots that were almost invisible. That's one major benefit of cognitivism. Practice is about building those connections as memory is utilized. So with each new legal case presented, I deepened my understanding of the law. Not only that, I was able to take the skills that I developed as a paralegal, as a court reporter, and I was able to transform them into an entirely different career. And I'm still doing that today. My court reporting skills of transcribing court procedures are now being utilized in transcribing audio, videos, books, and notes from live training sessions or live class sessions and transforming them into e-learning courses. Now, you see, that is what cognitivism is about. So in a nutshell, cognitivism says that information processing leads to understanding, retention, and eventually transference in new settings.